In 2019, Assyriologist Irving Finkel, curator of the Middle Eastern Department at the British Museum and one of the few people alive who reads Sumerian cuneiform as fluently as a morning newspaper, gave a lecture at the Royal Institution in London. After the talk, a retired cardiac surgeon from Edinburgh approached him. Finkel has never named him. The surgeon handed him a flash drive with photographs of a clay tablet purchased at auction in Istanbul in 2004 for roughly $600. The tablet came from the surgeon's father, a diplomat stationed in Iraq in the 1970s. Finkel looked at the images and asked the surgeon not to show them to anyone else. The tablet was genuine. 12 by 8 centimeters, dense text in Akkadian with Sumerian logograms, 28 lines on the obverse, 19 on the reverse. Old Babylonian period, approximately 1750 BCE. The content was a variant of the motif scholars call Enki and the creation of man. The standard version is well known. Gods tired of labor, humans made from clay and divine blood. This tablet followed the same frame. But where standard versions describe creation as a single act, this tablet stopped and began to list, organ by organ, 23 entries, each with a Sumerian name, a functional description, and the identity of the god responsible for modifying that organ. Not creation from nothing, modification. The text implied a base body already existed, and the gods redesigned it like engineers redesigning a prototype. 22 organs were marked due, completed. The 23rd carried a different term, one that translates as left in the middle of the process, unfinished. And this organ is not a hypothetical abstraction. Its description, location in the body, size, and function, matches a real organ that modern medicine still cannot explain. Finkel did not publish. He made private notes, consulted 2 colleagues, and returned the flash drive with a recommendation to deposit the tablet with a recognized institution. Whether the surgeon complied is unknown. What is known is that Finkel's notes, portions of which were seen by a postdoctoral researcher at SOAS, who later discussed them in a closed forum, contain a partial transliteration of the 23 entries. The list uses Sumerian compound terms, combining body part words with functional descriptors. The first entry is shagig, the red inside, the organ that moves the blood, the heart, modified by Enki. The second is hazi, the bellows, the organ that draws breath, the lungs, modified by Enlil, the storm god, consistent with his association with wind across the entire corpus. The third is Uber Banda, the small vessel maker, behind the bone at the center of the chest, the organ that builds the warriors of the blood, the thymus, modified by Ninhursag. The list continues with entries corresponding to the liver, kidneys, spleen, stomach, intestines, pancreas, adrenal glands, bone marrow, the reproductive organs, the eyes, the inner ear, the skin, and the brain, which receives the longest entry and is attributed jointly to Enki and Nisaba. Every entry follows the same structure: name, location, function, modifying deity, and the word due. The entry for the kidneys describes them as the filters that separate poison from clean water. The adrenal glands as the organs that release the fighting juice when danger is near. Bone marrow as the factory inside the bones that builds new blood. A Bronze Age scribe produced functional descriptions that in several cases were not matched by Western medicine until the 17th century. And then there is entry 23. The 23rd entry breaks the pattern. Every previous organ was marked due, completed. This one is marked bara due, not brought to completion. The organ is described as Gish Shirgal Anna, the great gland of heaven. Location, behind the eyes, center of the skull, where the bone becomes thin. Size, a small date seed. Function, and here the text shifts from inventory to what reads like a technical failure report. The organ that was meant to allow the created ones to see as the gods see. Not physical vision. The eyes were already completed under a different god. This was a different kind of sight. The text uses Igigal Anki, the great sight of heaven and earth, a term that in other texts refers to divine omniscience, the ability to see what is hidden, to know what has not been spoken. The tablet states Enki began the modification, but was ordered to stop by Enlil. The reason is a single line. If this gland is completed, the created ones will see what we see, and there will be no difference between them and us. Enlil ordered the work stopped. Enki complied. The gland was left unfinished, present but non-functional, installed but never activated, divine hardware running on no software. The organ the tablet describes, small, gland-like, behind the eyes, center of the skull, thinnest bone, size of a date seed, is the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the single most mysterious organ in human anatomy. The pineal gland sits in the geometric center of the brain, between the two hemispheres, in a groove where the two halves of the thalamus join. Roughly 5 to 8 millimeters long, less than 1/5 of a gram. For centuries, Western medicine considered it vestigial, a leftover from some earlier stage of evolution, like the appendix before we discovered its immune function. Descartes called it the seat of the soul in 1649, a phrase treated as philosophical curiosity rather than hypothesis ever since. Modern endocrinology knows it produces melatonin, the hormone regulating sleep-wake cycles. It responds to light signals transmitted through the retina, standard biology textbook material. And here is where it gets strange. In non-mammalian vertebrates, fish, frogs, lizards, the pineal gland is literally a third eye, a photoreceptive organ sitting on top of the skull, covered by a thin layer of bone, capable of detecting light directly. The New Zealand tuatara, a reptile essentially unchanged for 200 million years, has a pineal eye with a lens, a retina, and a rudimentary cornea. It is a functional eye. In humans, the pineal gland retains photoreceptor proteins, the identical cellular machinery the retina uses to detect light. It contains rod and cone cells. It has its own connection to the visual cortex. It is, in every measurable biological sense, an eye that does not see. Or more precisely, an eye that was built to see but does not. The calcification question makes it stranger still. Starting in adolescence, the human pineal gland begins accumulating calcium deposits, hydroxyapatite crystals, the same mineral found in teeth and bones. By adulthood, it is one of the most calcified structures in the entire brain. The rate is nearly universal in humans over 40. No other mammalian pineal gland calcifies at this rate. No other mammalian pineal gland contains the density of crystals that the human one does. In 2002, a study published in Bioelectrochemistry found that these hydroxyapatite crystals are piezoelectric. They generate an electrical charge when subjected to mechanical pressure. Piezoelectric crystals in the geometric center of the brain. No mainstream neuroscience paper has proposed a function for this property. The crystals exist. They are piezoelectric. They are in the exact organ the Sumerian tablet describes as unfinished, and no one has explained what they are for. If the tablet were the only ancient text to single out a small gland behind the eyes as the organ of divine sight, it could be filed as coincidence. It is not the only one. The Egyptian eye of Horus, when overlaid on a sagittal cross-section of the brain, aligns with the structures surrounding the pineal gland with anatomical precision. The curl traces the medulla oblongata, the pupil sits at the thalamus, the eyebrow follows the corpus callosum. The center, where all lines converge, sits at the pineal gland. The Egyptians called it the eye that sees into the duat, the hidden world, the dimension of the gods. The Hindu tradition places the Ajna chakra at this exact location. The Upanishads describe it as the seat of inner vision and direct knowing. Shiva is depicted with a third eye that perceives reality as it truly is. The Buddhist tradition identifies it as the sixth sense gate. Tibetan texts describe practices to decalcify and activate this center through meditation and breathwork. The Taoist tradition calls it the crystal palace, the point where yin and yang merge to produce spiritual vision. 4 traditions, 4 continents, same anatomical location, same described function, an organ of perception beyond physical sight, located behind the eyes, in the center of the skull, associated with the ability to see the invisible. The Sumerians said it was left unfinished on purpose. The Egyptians encoded its precise anatomy in the most sacred symbol of their civilization. The Hindus, Buddhists, and Taoists developed entire contemplative systems designed to reactivate it. The convergence is either the most widespread coincidence in the history of human religion, or it preserves a shared memory of something that was once known, was deliberately taken away, and has been partially rediscovered independently across millennia by traditions that had no contact with each other or with the cuneiform record. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan confirmed in the journal Science that the mammalian pineal gland produces dimethyltryptamine, DMT. Rick Strassman had hypothesized the connection in the 1990s, but the Michigan study provided the first direct measurement. DMT is one of the most powerful psychoactive compounds known to science. When administered to humans in controlled settings, it produces experiences that subjects describe with striking uniformity, regardless of cultural background. Contact with non-human intelligences, perception of geometric structures of impossible complexity, the sensation of entering a space that feels more real than ordinary waking reality, encounters with beings who communicate through direct knowing rather than spoken language. The experience lasts approximately 15 minutes when inhaled. It produces no measurable physical harm. It is endogenous. The human body makes it. The pineal gland makes it. And no mainstream neuroscience paper has explained why the human brain contains the complete biochemical machinery to produce a compound whose primary effect is the perception of what subjects universally describe as non-human entities existing in dimensions inaccessible to normal consciousness. The Sumerian tablet says the organ was designed to allow the created ones to see as the gods see. The compound the organ produces, when accidentally or deliberately activated, causes the human mind to perceive exactly what the tablet describes: beings, structures, and dimensions that are invisible under ordinary waking states. The organ exists. The compound exists. The experience matches the function described on a tablet inscribed 3,700 years ago. What does not exist is a mainstream scientific framework connecting these facts, because connecting them leads to a conclusion no peer-reviewed journal would publish: that the pineal gland is not vestigial and not merely a melatonin factory, but a receiver deliberately left incomplete. And the compound it produces is not a hallucinogen, but a signal, a brief, accidental activation of hardware that was never meant to be turned on. Finkel's encounter took place in 2019. No paper has been published. No catalog entry created. No museum has announced a new Old Babylonian creation variant with anatomical content. The tablet, if the surgeon followed advice, is in institutional hands somewhere. If not, it remains in a private collection in Edinburgh, seen by 3 scholars, photographed on a flash drive, otherwise invisible. The SOAS researcher who saw Finkel's notes discussed them once in 2021 and has not referenced them since. There is no formal suppression, no reclassification. Something quieter and more effective: professional self-censorship. Any scholar publishing this material will spend the rest of their career answering questions about ancient aliens and pseudo-archaeology. The cost of publishing is reputational destruction. The cost of not publishing is nothing. The incentive structure ensures silence. This is not conspiracy. It is institutional logic. The same logic that kept the Dead Sea Scrolls partially unpublished for 40 years, that delayed the Nag Hammadi library by decades, that has left thousands of cuneiform tablets untranslated in basements because the resources do not exist and the will to prioritize them is absent. The tablet does not need to be suppressed. It needs only to be ignored. And the system is optimized for exactly that. 23 organs, 22 completed, 1 left unfinished on the direct order of a god who feared what humans would become if the work was done. The organ exists in every human skull. It contains photoreceptor cells that detect no light. It accumulates piezoelectric crystals with no known function. It produces a compound that generates perception of non-human intelligences and dimensions invisible to ordinary consciousness. 4 ancient civilizations independently identified it as the seat of divine sight. Modern endocrinology has mapped its chemistry. Modern imaging has documented its calcification. Modern pharmacology has confirmed what it produces. And modern science has no unified theory for why any of this is the case. The Sumerians offered one. They said it was left incomplete on purpose, by a specific entity, for a specific reason. Completing it would erase the boundary between human and divine. Whether that is theology or technical documentation depends on the weight you give to convergence. A scribe who described 22 organs with accuracy predating Western anatomy by 3,000 years also described a 23rd as unfinished. That organ turns out to be the most anomalous structure in the brain, the one every ancient tradition identified as the key to transcendent perception, and the one modern science has catalogued in biochemical detail without explaining what it is for. The tablet is somewhere. Finkel knows where. The pineal gland sits in the center of your skull, calcifying a little more each year, producing a compound that briefly opens a door to something the Sumerians said you were never meant to see. 22 completed. One left in the middle. And every human alive is walking around with the unfinished work of a god who was told to stop.